Jim Knowles didn't just take the Penn State defensive coordinator job. No, he wanted it, and he wanted it for this exact reason.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Jim Knowles had his introductory press conference, so I'm going to give you all of my takeaways from that, starting with the fact that he is the missing piece to a national championship run for this Penn State team. Does he want to be a head coach? We're going to discuss all of that, plus the fundamentals that he is going to bring to this defensive squad now, and let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. It's always appreciated. So, starting with the fact that Jim Knowles didn't just take this job just to take it. No, he made it very clear for a few reasons. Of course, yes, being the highest paid coordinator in all of college football certainly helps, but that shows that Penn State is committed to him and that they would value him as a coach on staff. So that's part of the reason, of course, but it's the fact that he's going to bring what he does as a defensive coordinator between the defensive philosophy, his culture, but ultimately why he chose Penn State is because he sees an opportunity here to win a national championship, to be able to build a number one defense, the commitment to not only himself personally, but James Franklin. One of the reasons he didn't choose Oklahoma, even though he was initially interested in that defensive coordinator opening, is because there's really not a lot of proven tangible commitment. There's rumors that Brent Venables is on the hot seat. Let's just say things aren't as secure at Oklahoma as they are in Penn State. So now you know you're going to be working with James Franklin for the foreseeable future. You want to join James Franklin's staff, and you don't want that to be a situation where things are going to change in a year, 2 years' time. No, you want some continuity here, and you want the best opportunities, multiple opportunities, not just only this season, this upcoming season for 25, going into 2026 in January when the postseason actually rolls around. You want to be able to do this year in and year out, 26, 27, 28. And Jim Knowles shot down any idea that he wants to be a head coach. And he said that he is solely focused on bringing a national championship to Penn State and building a number one defense, which he believes he could do, or else he would have taken the Oklahoma job, or else he would have stayed at Ohio State, even though they didn't pay as much financially. It certainly would have been a pay raise. I think he was going to get somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.8 million, which is still nothing to bat an eye at. But the fact that he was willing to leave Ohio State, yes, there were some alleged tensions and all of that, but this isn't a step back for him. He feels like he can build a number one defense and be a part of not just for 2025, but multiple championship runs over the course of his career. But that's going to be the big debate, is that, okay, well, if he wins a national title sooner rather than later, he helps Penn State be a part of that. Does that mean that he's going to bolt for a head coaching job or maybe another defensive coordinator job down the road because, oh, well, it doesn't get any better than Ohio State? That's what Ohio State people like to say. For Jim Knowles, it is different. Circumstances are different. For Tom Allen, him being from the South, right, he was born and raised in Indiana, but he's also been in the southeastern part of the country. Jim Knowles was born and raised in Philadelphia, so talking about his roots a lot of the time, He mentioned the fact that, hey, I'm Philadelphia born and raised. I know what it's like. I have a great long-term appreciation for Penn State. So this is different. He doesn't view this as a stepping stone for him. This is the destination job, and that's something that a lot of people emphasize. To be at the top, you got to be able to find your destination job and that candidate to fill that destination role, because you don't want this constant turnstile as coaches. Whether you're leading a program or and finding the people to fill out the staff, you want to be able to find people that are committed and view this as the dream job. Well, based on the way that Jim Knowles said, I get it. There are going to be naysayers that disagree and just say he's only saying that just because It's hard to disagree with the fact that, yes, he was born and raised in Pennsylvania. He grew up in Philadelphia. He has an appreciation for his heritage. He still has family and friends around this area. Hey, that case was made for him to take the Oklahoma job, that his fiance and I think his college-age son was playing basketball for a university over in not Oklahoma specifically, but in the area at a Division II or Division III. So don't exactly quote me on that one. But what I'm getting at is that why does that apply? Why does relationships and family ties, why does that apply to taking the Oklahoma Sooners job but not Penn State? Because it seems he has more of an appreciation for his roots in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and his appreciation for growing up and watching Penn State football. He talked specifically about how I used to watch highlights of Penn State football when I was growing up as a child, and there were only 3 TV channels and everything else. And that's what I mean. So it applies to one, but not here. I think it certainly absolutely applies here when you actually listen to the sincerity in Jim Knowles' words. So going off of all of that, he is going to bring with him a Pennsylvania type of mentality, a Philadelphia type of mentality, which is going to fit in with what Penn State wants to do. You want to find people that culturally fit what you are doing. So this is why he's the missing piece, because he checks a lot of boxes from the fact that he's one of the best coordinators presently in all of college football, offensively and defensively. Penn State is committed to him. He's committed to Penn State, and culturally he fits. Culturally, he makes a lot of sense. I mean, this is something that James Franklin has been working at for quite some time. He has made it very apparent, subtly, I mean, in the coaching ranks, not publicly, by declaring in a press conference, I want Jim Knowles, and nobody else can be defensive coordinator here. And I'm not trying to imply that Manny Diaz and Tom Allen weren't realistic options or that Penn State was settling in a sense, but in a perfect world, where James Franklin understands how to build his coaching staff, other than Mike Yurcich, what coaching hire, and I know people are going to say Marcus Hagans, give that one time. Give that one time. Trust me. My point is, James Franklin does not make mistakes when it comes to coordinator hires, especially now that he has the alignment within the university from President Neely Bendapudi, from, of course, Athletic Director Pat Kraft. And Jim Knowles talked about that. It's the alignment, it's the support, and then getting that cultural fit where everybody's just going to be on the same page. There's not going to be this disagreeableness. Everybody is going to work with each other. I think that was an interesting point. I'm not trying to interpret this as a subtle jab at Ohio State, but he mentioned how there's going to be cooperation among him and the other defensive staff members, Deion Barnes and Anthony Poindexter, and that was one of the alleged rumored tensions that not everybody on the defensive staff at Ohio State kind of saw eye to eye. So that's a key takeaway there, is that everybody is just going to be on the same page. Everybody is going to be pushing in the same direction. Of course, are there going to be disagreements just casually? Absolutely, because it's football. It demands the best, and it's going to be, especially with what's on the line. This is the territory now. You don't make a move like going to get Jim Knowles and not expect to have these expectations that weigh on you. So that's going to put pressure on you, people. But stress, if you can manage it the right way, is actually a good thing. And I see that here with just chemistry that is being put into place. People that are aligned from the top all the way down between Pat Kraft, the president of the university, and Neely Bendapudi, to James Franklin, Jim Knowles, Andy Kotelnicki. Jim Knowles talked about how he's already in communication with Andy Kotelnicki, and they're just exchanging ideas. They immediately started talking to one another. So I bet Kotelnicki's first question was, how'd you do it? How'd you keep me from scoring a touchdown, not once at Penn State, but also when I was at Kansas? So iron sharpens iron, as the Penn State saying goes here, right? But this is Jim Knowles chose Penn State chose Jim Knowles, but Jim Knowles chose Penn State because he does see an opportunity here to legitimately build one of the best defenses in the country. Is it going to be number one overnight? Probably not. But I think it's going to be very close to being at a better starting point than where he was at Ohio State. It was an uphill battle in 2022 and look how he turned a defense that just wasn't that great at the time into a top 3 and then the number 1 defense in 23 and 24. He's going to have a head start. He's going to have a running head start at Penn State. This was a group that was top 10, top 15 with fundamentals of what he likes to do in his base 4-2-5 defense. It's just going to be some subtle tweaks here and there. And I think Penn State. So that was one of the objections that, it takes a long time for Jim Knowles' defense to really set in. Not in this instance. No, he's going to fit right in at Penn State. But let's talk about some of those defensive changes. There's the Jack position, the Leo position that I think people are going to be interested in, and which player would be that for Penn State. We're going to talk about it more on the other side of this break. And today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Are you looking for tickets to your next big event? Whether it's a sporting event, it's a concert, it's a comedy show, finding the right ticket at the right place, it can be a headache, but with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the hard work, the heavy lifting for you. It curates the best deals, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets, endless ticket listings. When you use Gametime Picks, this is why you'll love it. The curated deals. It'll make it super simple for you to find great tickets at a great price. There's no more sifting through those thousands of options. And you can get the super deal. It'll be listed at the top, either of the Gametime app or gametime.co for a prime seat, and you won't believe the value. It's a steal. And then there's the seat view itself. The seat view feature is a game changer because before you hit buy, you can actually see your point of view from your seat and what it will look like at that venue. Just gives you some reassurance there. The best part is you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. And if you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Are you ready to make your next event even better? Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. How difficult is it going to be for this Penn State team to pick up on a Jim Knowles defense? And frankly, I don't think it's going to be that difficult because the building blocks have been there since Manny Diaz. And then you still have Anthony Poindexter on staff. You still have Deion Barnes, right? All of these assistant coaches know what the fundamentals are, and the players have been playing in it. Is there going to be differences in terminology? Are there going to be are players going to find better positions on defense at the end of the day? Probably. Most likely. Are there going to be adjustments? Yes. But you're not starting from the ground up. This isn't a complete overhaul. You're going to make some different changes that are going to be subtle, that really isn't reinventing the wheel here. And one of those things is, and one of these, it's a subtle, not so subtle change that I alluded to before the break. Is this, whatever they're going to call it, the Jack, the Leo position, this is different. This is very different from the Lion position. So I don't want anybody to get confused. Maybe they rename it in such a way, but the Lion position was a safety defensive back hybrid role that was the 4-2-5 in Penn State's defense. And like I said, elements of it in Manny Diaz's defense. Tom Allen, that was the full base. So it was a hybrid for Manny Diaz. It was the full defense for Tom Allen. And now Jim Knowles is taking over, again, with players that understand this. They understand the fundamentals of this. But the different position is this hybrid defensive end outside linebacker where Dani Dennis Sutton can be a superstar, can turn into a superstar. I don't know how many people that, watch this show, listen to this show, how much Ohio State Buckeye football you took in. I don't blame you if you took a lot of Buckeye football in, but this is why we're here to talk about this, right? To get a better understanding. So we do have to understand Ohio State football to understand what Jim Knowles is going to do and implement with Penn State. And this Jack Leo position, it's a defensive end outside linebacker role, if you will, in this 4-2-5, where you can do so many adjustments up front. And it's going to take a versatile superstar. It is going to take a superstar type of player. Abdul Carter, I think, would have fit into this role very well. Honestly, Dani Dennis Sutton, I think, will take over this role. And don't get me wrong, there are going to be backups, but this is supposed to be the superstar of your defense up front. And I think that's part of the appeal of why Dani Dennis Sutton came back, because of this opportunity promise. Because if everything goes well, he stays healthy, of course, he gets to work and study and learn Jim Knowles' defense from the beginning all the way into the season, that you're going to do this and you're going to succeed in this spot. Jack Sawyer was that. If you want a specific tangible example of what this looks like and what Denai Dennis Sutton will do in this role. Watch some film and see the way that Jack Sawyer operates. And it's a complex role. It is not for just the average football player, because you have to know your assignment. Half the battle is just knowing it and understanding it. Yes, I know it's not rocket science, Zach. Football players need to know their job and where they're supposed to be. Yes, but it's the different responsibilities and recognition and the subtle. Anytime the offense does something, you have to be the one to react. So you have to memorize more of the different moves that you are as this special defensive end player. So the role is going to be massive. Not a lot of people can handle that. Jack Sawyer, as a veteran defensive end, was able to do that. Denai Dennis Sutton is going to be able to do that. He's going to his 4th year of college football. He's as motivated as it gets. He is as smart and talented as it is. So when you combine all of that together to be the superstar face of the defense, you're going to get an outcome that Penn State is banking on, but it's going to happen if everything goes well. And when I say that, right, just knock on the wooden desk here. He's just got to stay healthy, because I think Denai Dennis Sutton will take on this role. I think he can do an even better job than Jack Sawyer, because I think he's more athletically gifted than Jack Sawyer. Jack Sawyer he's a 1st round NFL defensive end. Maybe no later than a 2nd round, right? I'm not afraid to admit that here, right? Objectively speaking, Denai Dennis Sutton, he can be a top 10 draft pick. And I don't think Jack Sawyer can be that. So if you're going to fit Denai Dennis Sutton into this role, there's going to be a lot that goes into it, but he's the guy that you can ask. And Abdul Carter could have done this too as well, but there's just some more nuances to it. And yes, Denai Dennis Sutton can absolutely drop into coverage, because it's not only just about pass rushing, it's about shifting the formation. It's about shifting from a 4-man front to a 3-man front, dropping back into coverage. And he actually did that against Notre Dame and had that interception. If you don't, well, Denai Dennis Sutton's just a pass rusher. He only knows how to defend the run. He can't handle responsibilities and pass coverage. Au contraire. Yes, he can. So those are one of those subtle changes, and it's not an overhaul. Denai Dennis Sutton has been doing it, but this is one example of what makes Jim Knowles' defense so unique, because it's so difficult to game plan for. And I'll shout out For the Bloggy here, because they had a very nice, thorough breakdown of it. That's one element of it, but it's the way that they can roll coverages and zones. And one thing they really keyed in on, you go back to the game where Drew Aller went to Columbus, Penn State and this team, and Mike Yursich and Drew Aller they had no answer, because Jim Knowles was able, it was chess versus checkers. And it wasn't so much that Drew Aller, he looked bad that day, the offense looked bad that day, but they just had no answers. It really was a case of chess versus checkers. And now you have that in the fold. You have the guy that was the architect of that game plan that just ran circles around you. It was a nightmare trying to game plan for that. Drew Aller thought he had one read. It wasn't there. Okay, then that means the second read's going to be open. No. And then good luck trying to find your third read by the time that a JT Tuimoloau or a Jack Sawyer at that time in 2023 would get after the quarterback. So think the same thing for Denai Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant. So you see how all of this applies. And then the secondary goes along with it. You have the players that already understand the fundamentals of this defense, but it's also the talent. Knowing's half the battle. Being able to execute is the other half of this battle. This secondary very well might be the most, of all the position groups that Penn State is returning, the most, the offensive line certainly has a case, but honestly on the defensive end, I'd say the secondary and the offensive line are right there in this battle of who has the most returners, who has the best setup for the position group. And there's a case to be made for the secondary. Well, they lost KJ Winston. Well, they lost Jalen Reed. You get Zachy Wheatley back as that center field type of safety. And then it's all the defensive backs that can just do whatever you need them to do. They can defend the run. They can play man. They can play zone. And that's Elliott Washington, Zion Tracy, Adavian Collins, right? AJ Harris, who could be that superstar. So I just rattled off a bunch of them there. And don't forget about players that are just starting to come into their own. A Dejon Lane. You get a King Mack back. You have Vavu Torre, Kenny Wosley, right? Guys that saw playing time down the stretch that there are so many options here. So you have a pending superstar in AJ Harris, guys who, with the right kind of training and the right development, Elliott Washington's on his way to being that. Zion Tracy, if everything goes right, they're on the right trajectory. Oh, and then you just had a superb recruiting class where there's already rumblings that Darius Dixon from the state of California, who would be a true freshman this season, could see some playing time, enrolled early, spring foot. This is why winter workouts and spring football are so valuable. But all of these players are on the right track, and then knowing what they know already, combine that with the way that Jim Knowles is able to get the most out of his players, there you go. That's why I have so much confidence that Penn State's defense will not miss a beat. They are going to take a top 10, top 15 group despite the losses defensively. You have a lot returning, and you have a coach that's going to be able to maximize their talent by the time the season rolls around. Let's talk about some of the other takeaways here as well. I've thrown a lot of them out there. Will he coach on the sideline or the press box? That was a debate from this season with Tom Allen. It's not going to be a debate with Jim Knowles. Where is he going to coach? Some final takeaways. I'll tell you more after this. Press box or on the sideline, and Jim Knowles and James Franklin are already going to agree on something, and that's that he's going to call his plays from up in the press box. Hold on, because at Beaver Stadium, there's currently no press box. So where's he going to call these? And I find it just a little ironic that this was a point of debate with Tom Allen, and now literally Penn State does not have a press box. So Jim Knowles will have an indoor elevated area where he will call plays, but it's not going, let's just say this, he's not going to call his defensive game plan on the sideline. So I want to make light of that. I make a little fun of it, but this is good to see, and I agree with this. I agree that coordinators should be calling the plays from the press box, the booth, however you want to frame it, because you don't get the best point of view on the sideline. And now, granted, I've never been a coach in that situation, so I don't know what's better. Hey, Tom Allen might like the sideline. He might just, feed off of the energy, being around his players, being able to coach them up in that regard, and maybe that's valuable to a defensive coordinator. I think 100% of offensive coordinators should be in the press box, in the booth. I think it is debatable as far as a defensive coordinator, if they should be on the sideline, if they should be able to there, because that's kind of traditional. So I don't disagree that Tom Allen might fit better on the sideline and be around his players and be able to coach them up. But you have to make the argument that you just have a better point of view. You can see the field a lot better. You can watch the motions, and that's tougher to see when you're at that standalone angle, whereas you have that aerial bird's eye view from the press box, the booth. So they'll have to move over on the other side of the field. There's all the other seats for alumni and donors that are enclosed there on the other side of the 50. That's where everybody's going to go. For anybody that's not familiar with the change and the plans until Penn State actually gets that press box built, there's going to be designated areas for coaches and for the media as well to be on the other side of the 50, on the east side of the stadium. So that's where Jim Knowles will be. But he said, he said, and this is where I really took into account that he doesn't want to coach on the sideline because it is not the way that he views it. And again, agree or disagree, I agree with it. Your job as a defensive coordinator is not to rally the troops, to get people hyped up. It is to call a defensive game plan and play chess against the opposing team to the best of your abilities. There are too many distractions in his mind if you're down on the sideline. He gets to focus and he gets to do his job to the best of his abilities if he is up in the booth, if he's up in the press box. So I wholeheartedly agree that it's just what's right for Franklin, Andy Kotelnicki, and Jim Knowles. In the case of Kotelnicki and Knowles, that they're going to be up in the booth, up in the press box. You have everybody else on the sideline. You have Dan Connor, you have Deion Barnes. That's what the position coaches are for. That's what James Franklin's for down on the sideline. You don't need the coordinators to be there. So to each their own. For Tom Allen, that's great. Go do that at Clemson. That's probably one of the appealing reasons of why I'd be surprised if he's in the press box with Dabo Swinney giving him the defensive coordinator job there. I think that's one of the promises that he was going to have going back to Clemson, aside from some other reasons, but that was one of them. For Jim Knowles, makes sense for him to be in the press box and something that him and James Franklin will agree with. Last thing I want to hit on here before we wrap up this show is recruiting. Jim Knowles doesn't recruit. He can't recruit. He's just a defensive coordinator. Okay, well, even if he's just a defensive coordinator, I think by proxy, just the way that he operates and builds out insanely productive defenses, that he's going to recruit in that regard, even if he doesn't go, visiting high schools or anything else like that. But we've already seen that whether it's the change of scenery or whether it's the change in responsibility, who knows if Ryan Day in Ohio State said, we just want you to focus on defense. We don't need you out in recruiting. Well, Jim Knowles has a very strong connection at St. Joe's Prep school that, yes, he graduated from. Yes, that cranks out talent left and right to the college level. Kyle McCord and Marvin Harrison Jr., but those are just a couple of prospects. And Knowles is already starting to facilitate those relationships, build some of those bridges where Penn State has frankly struggled in recruiting. And now you just have another asset, whether it is by proxy or whether it is by direct communication. You're getting somebody that just, he's familiar with the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Central, Eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey area of recruiting. He just culturally he fits in, and this goes back to what I said in the first segment. So it's not about culturally just fitting in with what Penn State wants to do in its direction, but also part of that recruiting, building relationships, communication, all of that stuff. So Jim Knowles is going to be an A+ hire, not only from schematics, building a defense, but also building the future of a defense with the fact that he's going to be a solid recruiter because he's from that area and he's able to relate to a lot of those same people that are now presently in the areas that he grew up in. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. I appreciate each and every one of you for checking out this episode. Again, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. I always appreciate what you have to say in these conversations as well. Please leave a like on this episode, share it with friends and family, and if you are new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every single day. We talk about Penn State football, Penn State wrestling, Penn State basketball every single day, and that's why it's called Locked On Nittany Lions. And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, got to check out Locked On Big Ten with host Craig Sheeman. Craig puts the Big Ten first. Anybody and everybody. Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, yeah, I know, but all 18 schools in the Big Ten. You can find Locked On Big Ten available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.